On the phone, it's a pleasure to welcome to the program Mike Masnick. He is the editor of Techdirt, the founder of Floor 64. Welcome to the program.
Sure, thanks for having me.
So, Mike, first, let's start off with the Declaration of Internet Freedom. This was a fairly small, declaration put out by Free Press. Basically proposing that people sign and say that they stand for a free and open internet. How would you characterize the document?
Well, the first thing I would say is that it wasn't put out by Free Press. It was put out by a whole bunch of people, a pretty large coalition of different individuals and groups. Free Press was one of them, and certainly helped spearhead a lot of the publicity around it. But I think what was important about that document was the fact that it was this very, very broad coalition of individuals and groups, many with very, very different viewpoints, who wanted to, set up a conversation that was very focused on just basic principles around how important the internet is and why we believe the internet is useful, and why we worry about potential attacks on the internet, either from government or corporations in some cases, and we just wanted to establish a kind of a baseline. And so a document came out that was, very, very simple, as you said, very short, that just basically put these ideas out there for the sake of discussion. It doesn't recommend any specific policy. It doesn't take any particular partisan viewpoint on anything. It's just, a simple document about basic principles that we believe the internet is important and good. We would like to see it continue to be that way.
Don't censor the internet, promote universal access to fast and affordable networks, keep the internet an open network where everyone's free to connect, communicate, write, read, watch, speak, listen, learn, create, innovate, protect the freedom to innovate and create without permission, don't block new technologies, don't punish innovators, and protect privacy and defends everybody's ability to control how their data and devices are used. How do you perceive, what are the threats? When you say government or corporations attacking the internet, what form does that take?
It takes all different forms. We've certainly seen it, over the years where various interests, try and either block out new technologies or new innovations.
Oh, sorry, you there? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I heard an extra voice, but it went away.
That's one of the ways that they get to you, right? On the internet.
That's right. There's all different ways. A lot of times, companies try and block out new technologies or new innovations, or seek to invade people's privacy, or all sorts of things. And the most obvious example that we've seen that got a lot of attention and that led to a lot of to this original document was the fight over SOPA and PIPA, from about 6 months ago, where it was clearly an industry pushed piece of legislation that was really designed to benefit one particular industry, and really kind of attack some of the core principles of the internet that have been around and are part of the reason why the internet is so powerful and so useful.
So that brings us to, this document is, like you say, it's fairly open-ended, and it doesn't necessarily speak about as to, it just lists some principles that I think within the context of people who care about the issue of a free internet, fairly, I think, uncontroversial, and I think it was meant to bring together people from different sort of ideological ends of the spectrum. The Pauls, Ron and Rand Paul, through their campaign for liberty, have come out very strongly against this document, and you wrote about this. Give me a sense of of how they seem to be attacking this. And you write in your piece on Techdirt that you're a supporter of free market capitalism, or a pretty big supporter. How does the Paul's attack on this sort of run contrary to how at least you perceive these libertarian values?
Sure, and you know, I should be clear on a couple things. One is that, you know, certainly part of the goal of the original document, the Internet Declaration of Freedom, was to get people to think about these things and come up with their own ideas, and not necessarily to agree with the ideas that were put forth in that declaration. And part of what has been interesting and kind of exciting to see is that a lot of, you know, different ideas have come out, and different people have spoken out in different ways and suggested their own ideas, and it's led to a really, really interesting discussion, I think. And so, you know, from that standpoint, you know, it was great to see Ron and Rand Paul sort of jump into this conversation. It was never really made clear. They never specifically stated that their document was a response to the other one. So it's, you know, it could be somewhat separate, but if you compare sort of the two documents, you know, they seem to have a very, very different tone. You know, the principles one was designed to be, you know, completely nonpartisan, or in some ways post-partisan. This idea of, you know, let's just establish a baseline of principles. It doesn't recommend any particular policy. It doesn't support any particular ideology. It says, you know, let's take a step back from politics. And actually think about, you know, what can we agree on? What can we agree on is you know, good about the internet, and that we would like to see continue, and start a discussion about that. And then, you know, what I thought was unfortunate about the statement from the Pauls was that it sort of went in a very different direction. There were a lot of things in their document that I actually agreed with. You know, talking about the importance of innovation and worrying about, you know, attempts to block innovation, which I think is a major concern. But a lot of their documents sort of went in the direction of being very divisive, and trying to sort of separate out different things, and to suggest that words were really code words for, you know, bringing in, you know, government control, or I forget the exact terms that they use. I called it, you know, collectivist.
Collectivism, I think they referred to it, and they said the road to tyranny is being paved by a collectivist industrial complex, a dangerous brew of wealthy international NGOs, progressive do-gooders, corporate cronies, and sympathetic political elites. I mean, the pros, I mean, you know, put the pros aside for a minute. The spokespeople for Campaign for Liberty saying this is going to be essentially the Paul's new big push after the audit the Fed. And audit the Fed was interesting enough, also a transpartisan project. Both the left and the right were big pushers of this. Grayson in Congress, as well as Ron Paul. And so, but they seem to be wanting to sort of stake out a position early on. And it's interesting because once you do get beyond these principles, the idea of we want a free internet, the question becomes, what does that actually mean? And what does it mean to you? I mean, in the sense that, I mean, I appreciate from the perspective of libertarians that government can be a vehicle for corporate interests to shut down, to fight something like an open internet. Is there another mechanism? Would you agree with that? I mean, I'm just trying to get a sense, because I'm not fully, I don't know exactly where your sense is in terms of executing these things.
In terms of executing, I'm sorry, which?
Well, pursuing an agenda of, let's say, net neutrality, for instance. We talk about net neutrality. Both the Pauls and those who want to see government regulate, essentially, a net neutrality, both want to take ownership of, essentially, that concept, but want to execute it in different ways. So give me your sense of it.
Net neutrality is a fairly complex concept, and almost it seems that almost everyone who argues over it uses slightly different definitions, which makes it more and more complex. I think that the concept of net neutrality is a very important one. This sort of end-to-end principle, this idea that when you get on the internet, and if you want to build a service or if you want to access a service, you can connect those two endpoints, you, the individual, or you, an organization trying to reach someone at the other end of the internet. That's an important principle. It's been around, effectively since the beginning of the internet. It's part of what makes it really, really powerful. The fear is that all this discussion over net neutrality and kind of different debates over what does it really mean. The worry has always been that and this is where sort of the libertarian fears, I think, are somewhat warranted, is that you can get a process where effectively certain companies hijack that process, and you can create a piece of legislation that really benefits them, even as it claims to regulate them. A lot of big companies are very skilled at playing the regulation game, so that when regulations come out, even if they're supposedly in the public interest or described in the public interest, that they will really be set up to benefit those corporations. And I think that is a legitimate fear, but it's tough to sort of stake out that nuanced position saying net neutrality is important. But actual legislation to support net neutrality can be captured by the industry,
right?
And when you stake out that position, both sides kind of dislike that, and so it's tricky. And I think what it does is it obscures the real issue, which is fundamentally in the U.S. we have a very limited competitive landscape when it comes to internet access. Most of us have really one or two options at most. And that allows for very limited ability for companies to focus on what is in the best interest of their consumers, because they can effectively collude to limit how much they have to build out their network. When you look at other countries that have much more competition, network neutrality doesn't even come up as an issue, because nobody would go against that principle, because they would lose all their customers. And so it's the whole fight over network neutrality, to me, is really a sign of a symptom of a problem. It's not the problem itself. It's the fact that we just don't have enough competition in the U.S. And part of that is due to sort of some weird policy decisions over the last few years that basically handed the market over to two different industries, the telcos and the cable companies.
Right. That basically, I guess I don't know if those policy decisions were inevitable, in the sense that we have much we want to provide networks essentially for all the corners of the country to the extent that we want to, and we've allowed for certain monopolies by these providers, essentially, which has set up this scenario. But with that,
sure.
That is sort of like literally the facts under the ground. Sort of to allow for new cable essentially to be dropped in. We would have to. It seems to me the argument is that regulation. This is the argument from the Pauls, as far as I understand it. Regulation is bad because you can have bad regulations,
right.
As opposed to regulation in and of itself is a neutral tool. And the outcomes are a function of whether or not we have a government that is going to be responsive to a larger group of people in terms of whether or not that regulation works out. And how, in the absence of regulation, would we have net neutrality?
Sure. So, there's a few different issues to unpack, and in general, I'll say that I do tend to worry about the results of regulation, but I think that sort of the Paul's position to some extent ignores the fact that we're talking about markets that are already heavily regulated, right? And so the telco market you described, the issue of laying cables in the ground, for the most part, that involves, government subsidies. It involves, rights of way in order to bury those cables in land that the telcos don't own. They have to get rights of way from the government, the right to basically, dig up your yard to put in cable. And like the highway system, I think a lot of people think that is generally, that's a form of useful, potentially, regulation, because we build key infrastructure that is valuable, and they ignore that part of it, and assume that there was, that the internet sort of sprang up magically, entirely through private interest without any government participation, which is clearly not true. I mean, the internet started as from the government, and much of the telco networks exist because of government intervention. And so, if you have that, and there already is government intervention in the market, you can't claim that there should be absolutely no regulation when you already have some. You could argue that we should potentially get rid of that regulation. Well, that's not what they seem to be arguing. They seem to be arguing just for the status quo, effectively, which is a regulated market. And so I think that's, for them to take a position that says that is an anti-regulation regulatory position when it's an already regulated market is sort of, doesn't make sense to me.
Right. I mean, that's one of my biggest problems with sort of libertarian philosophy in many ways, is it doesn't take the world as it is. I mean, I'm not sure how we would roll back and go back in time to develop an internet without the government, or at what arbitrary point in history we would sort of say, okay, we're going to roll back to 1992 and everything that has happened since 92, we're going to go back and we'll relay those cables or whatever it is. But I'm curious, like how could net neutrality, this idea that no service provider, nobody who essentially has the monopoly over the tubes, to quote former Senator Stevens, the tubes, how we could have net neutrality without government regulation?
How they could exist today, or how? I
mean, how could we ensure that those people who control the tubes allow for free access and do not put obstacles in the way between, let's say, my internet stream versus I don't know, Comcast's of MSNBC? How do we do that in the absence of government regulation? Is it possible?
I think, again, this is a market that is already regulated in some way. So it's in there. But I do think that you don't necessarily need to put in a regulation that says we want to keep the internet neutral and trying to express the principles that set that up, because you certainly, and this is where, the libertarian fears come out, is that you could set up a regime that's actually worse than what we have today. So I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier, which is that what you do is you focus on trying to increase competition, because you can have a neutral internet without government regulation, because effectively that's what we have today. For the most part, the internet is neutral without any legislation that says it must be neutral, and it's what we've basically had, for the last 30 or 40 years, depending on how you count. And a lot of that, though, historically was driven by the fact that there was competition. Or
wasn't it also driven by the fact that there just wasn't as much money to be made? I mean, it seems to me like we've moved into a different era of the internet, where it is now there's big money to be made out there. And that's a relatively, in the great scope of things, a relatively new phenomena. So, I mean, how would we increase competition without regulation at this point? I mean, changes in regulation. I mean, I get the idea that libertarians are afraid there may be bad regulation. And I accept, believe me, every day I talk about, the capture of the regulatory capture of the FDA, of the EPA, I mean, wherever it is. But I still don't get how we can stop it seems to me inevitable that at one point Comcast is going to say, hey, you know, these are our tubes. We've got our own music delivery system or whatever it is, and we're going to favor it. We'll figure out different ways of favoring it. How do we prevent that? How do we develop this competition?
Sure. So, I mean, there are potentially a number of different ways, and one I think is really the simplest, which is sort of redefining how we classify the pipes, and you know, whether or not is that regulation. We've already classified the internet in one way, but you know, if you look back, you know, 15 years ago, at which point it was already pretty clear 15 years ago there was a ton of money to be made on the internet, but we had you know, mainly in the dial-up business, which is how, you know, many of us accessed the internet 15 years ago, widespread competition. You had, you know, hundreds or thousands of different ISPs that you could choose from, and what it was that anyone could offer that service, you know, across the network, and you could, you know, set up some servers and then connect to the network and offer an internet service provider service. And then what happened was we sort of reclassified the way we handled broadband so that you know, the
in the early 2000s it went from I think a classification 1 to a classification 2, which basically switched it from a telecommunications device to a an information service. And and so reclassification, and that was a fight that almost that reclassification almost happened a year or two ago.
In some ways, I mean, there was a fight over it. It wasn't, you know, perhaps in a limited way, and you know, I don't know that there's. I'm not speaking from what is you know, likely to happen. I'm speaking from what, you know, what might actually work. You know, and we've seen in other countries certainly that do have rules that allow different ISPs to work on other networks, that there tends to be a lot more competition. And so what it is a question of at what layer of the network do you want the competition to be? I mean, you raised the point earlier on that, you know, it's not easy to lay another cable. That's a massive expense. In the same way that, right, it's not easy to, you know, put down a competing highway somewhere, right? It's an infrastructure expense. It's a big infrastructure expense. But, you know, what we do allow is for people to, you know, anyone gets to use the highway once it's put down. And so the argument is that you leave the network and you assume that the network is there, and you focus on building competition one layer up from the network, which is the service on that network. And that's what we've effectively blocked out today based on the classification, which allowed the telcos to basically say, forget it. You know, nobody else can offer an ISP service on top of our network, you know, or without paying us a massive sum, which, you know, isn't worth it for almost everyone to pay. So you lose out on the competition, but other countries have treated it very differently, and have created a system where there is a lot more competition.
So, I mean, I know, and we just got a minute here. I know I appreciate your giving me this time. But so let me just see if this characterization makes sense, because I want to put this, I want to contextualize this in a way that is, you know, takes a fairly arcane sort of set of issues and people can digest it. But I mean, basically, you know, to use the highway as the metaphor, you're suggesting, and tell me again if I've mischaracterized this, but that we need to perceive essentially the internet, the actual infrastructure of the internet, in the same way that we do a highway. In some ways that it's owned by the commons, and, you know, I guess managed by the government and managed to the extent that it's kept, you know, it's serviced in some respects, or, you know, at least in terms of rights. And whereas the Pauls are basically saying, we want to privatize each section of the highway, and we'll allow for private corporations to put up tolls at any points that they perceive they can. Is that a fair assessment?
I don't know if I would go as far as some of the things you said. I mean, there are other models there where it's not effectively owned by the commons or even managed by the government. You can set up systems where effectively what is happening. All that's happening is a system where you're saying the internet itself should be open to competition at the service provider level. And then you can actually let different companies or individuals sort of own their own piece. And there are some interesting experiments where you have effectively not a commons-owned network necessarily, but an individually owned network where individuals sort of own their piece of the network, but with the agreement that they're sharing that network across, so that anyone can use the different pieces of it. And it becomes sort of a terminology thing, I recognize.
Right.
But I think it's important to look at which how do you define this network, and how do you define who owns which pieces of it. And towards a focus on what is the ultimate end goal, right? What is the best way to get this network in a way that anyone can use it effectively to sort of build and do something useful. And so, to that extent, I agree. The terminology, I guess we can debate over that, right, in terms of what does it mean in terms of who owns what. But conceptually, I think the point is, how do we set up a network so that there is real competition that leads to real innovation on that network.
Right, and I mean, I think it's you can't get away, it seems to me, from some type of regulation. I mean, I share the fear that it can be bad. I mean, that's what the whole fight was, I think, and continues to be, from groups that represent the idea of a free internet versus corporations. And in some ways, the government is the hammer, and it's really we're arguing as to who gets to wield it.
Yeah, and again, I mean, the point being, the internet is a regulated, telcos are regulated. So you can't argue that that the status quo is a non-regulatory position, because it's already regulated, and there are already subsidies, and Verizon and AT&T exists thanks to billions and billions of government subsidies. And so, if you want to argue for an entirely anti-regulatory position, you would have to explain, what do we do about that? Right. And nobody, certainly not the Pauls, seem to address that issue.
Mike Masnick, founder, Techdirt, editor, and founder of Floor 64. I really appreciate you taking the time today.